Thank you, Tanya. I rather hope the introductory music to my coming up to the podium would have been John Lennon's Imagine, because with your slogan, Imagine, One World, One Standard, and with the title of my address, I think that we're talking the same language and we're trying to live the same dream. So I've entitled the address Freedom to Dream, Necessity to Act, because I think those two things go in hand in hand, and that's the direction I've tried to take ISQua in, and I know that that's what GS1 believes in as well. That's the vision of ISQua, to lead the transformation of healthcare quality and safety globally. ISQua is a global organisation working in around 100 countries in one way or another across a number of programs, and our aim is to drive quality globally and to drive safety globally. When I use the word quality, I use that to incorporate safety, because I think a quality organisation is a safe organisation. So I tend, while I can see the distinction between the two, I tend not to differentiate them when I'm making references in talks such as this. So what I'll do today is I just say a word or two about ISQua and who we are and what we do, provide you with a context, and then I'm going to focus on two areas of our activity where I believe ISQua and GS1 have a capacity to work together. ISQua and GS1 have been partners now for a number of years in various ways. I don't think we've materialised and maximised our relationship as fully as we might. So I hope that as we move forward, we can correct that, and we can work more closely together specifically, because our dream is the same. What I will focus on of the areas of activity of ISQua is accreditation, which is a form of external evaluation, and innovation. One of the things that's not mentioned in the bio that's in your program is that an area that I've driven since I've been at ISQua, amongst a number of initiatives that I'm very proud of, is innovation and systems change, because we all know that the major problems that we confront in healthcare, adverse events and so on, are not by and large down to the inability or the lack of skill of clinicians and other healthcare workers. They're really mostly down to systems failure, and GS1 is working right in that space. The principal priorities of ISQua are these: external evaluation, which is mainly in our case accreditation at this time, although we are moving into regulation and certification, is an area that I will be one of the focuses that I'll be mentioning today. And the other is innovation and systems change. The other areas we work in, we have a very large and fast-growing education and knowledge sharing program. We have a CPD professional fellowship that is for healthcare workers, whatever work they do in the healthcare system, which is an online organisation, an online education program. And we're at the moment crafting in partnership with a dozen universities around the world an international Master of Healthcare Quality. We work in regions, and that's a developing area for us. Developing countries have special needs, and we believe that the work that we do can be applied very effectively to regions around the world, particularly developing countries. Patient-centred care. The patient is the heart of all that we do, and everything in healthcare must revolve around the patient at the centre of that care. That overlaps with some of the things that I'll be talking to you today about innovation. Briefly, that's who we are. We're 30 years old. We commenced as a small organisation around a particular activity and began with a scientific journal and an international conference. We were based in Australia for a number of years, and in 2008 a decision was made to move to Europe and to engage more closely with the Northern Hemisphere. And so that's been a huge success, and our activity since that move in 2008, at which time I became involved with ISQua, has been really quite phenomenal. So the first of my focuses today will be on accreditation, and the accreditation and ISQua Global Standards link, I think, is important. What we do is we accredit the accreditors. We don't accredit the coalface. We don't go into hospitals and blood banks and GP surgeries and radiology practices. We accredit those people that are doing that. So if you're HAS in France, or your ICAS in the Netherlands, or your CARS in Indonesia, your Accreditation Canada, JCI, ACHS, then we provide a global benchmark, a global standard that you can measure yourself against. Accreditation is a voluntary activity, so people that want to be recognised as meeting a global standard will come to ISQua and ask for our accreditation process to be applied to them. And we're the only body in the world that does that. We're the only body that sets a global benchmark for accreditation. And we accredit at 3 levels. We accredit health and social care standards. So we accredit the standards of organisations. We accredit the programs that they run to train their surveyors who go out and do the accrediting. And we accredit the organisations themselves. And the organisations that we accredit are those who develop the standards to apply nationally and regionally, and they carry out the assessments at a regional level. And we come in over the top and set the global benchmark. So ISQua standards provide global benchmarks and give direction to those who develop the standards and assess the performance against those standards. That's our role. That's the global reach of the accreditation program. We accredit around 60 organisations globally and sets of standards and surveyor training programs. The program has grown quite markedly since the move to the Northern Hemisphere, and we're anticipating that by 2020 we'll be accrediting over 100 organisations worldwide. So the accreditation program at GS1, I believe that there is a link and there is the potential for a partnership around accreditation. The focus of accreditation is, and the key to accreditation is the patients and other users and safety and risk. So GS1 is doing important work, as we've heard today, around safety and risk and patient safety, patient-centred care. So I think clearly we can explore further, and we should explore further, the way in which the ISQua accreditation program can benefit from the application of GS1 standards. So I think the GS1 standards can help hospitals and other facilities to manage risk to patients, to ensure the safety of patients, and to involve patients in their own care. And I'll come again to that last point, which I think is a really important development that we must embrace going forward in healthcare quality. So we at ISQua believe the important role for GS1 with us in healthcare accreditation and external evaluation would be the use of GS1 standards as a tool by hospitals and other facilities to demonstrate compliance. And I was interested in the last speaker's reference to IHF. We have an MOU with IHF and we work closely with them. And I think IHF would be, I would agree with the suggestion that IHF and GS1 could very usefully work together, and I think there could be a very important 3-way partnership between ISQua, GS1 and IHF. If I can turn my next focus to innovation and systems change. I've lived in Dublin now for 5 years, and before that for about 6 months when we moved ISQua from Australia. However, my home is Australia, and these are my great nieces. I own a sheep property with my brother in outback Australia, and that's the fleece just newly cut from the sheep that we run on that property, and there are 2 beautiful young children enjoying life bouncing around in that newly cut wool. We may criticise our health systems, and we must continue to seek to improve them. But by and large, we have highly trained clinicians, very competent healthcare workers. We have good facilities. We have systems that could be better. So you and I can get pretty much the healthcare that we need. It may not be as timely as we would like. We may not get the clinician of our choice, and it may cost us more than we like. But by and large, our health systems are very solid. If we flash forward to a different picture that confronts us if we don't change the way in which we deliver healthcare. And we can imagine, and this is taken from a very good publication that came out of a workshop run in China, a global workshop in China just last year. And it tells the story of throwing forward to somewhere like Santiago, Chile in 2030, 2040. And we're facing a very different future unless we change the way in which we approach healthcare. And one of the, if I can just take the USA for an example to illustrate why I think that there are dangers ahead unless we take a different approach to what we're doing. If we just take USA healthcare spending being at 17.5% of GDP, rising to 25% by 2040, and if we recognise that 30% of that is wasted, 30% of that does not make any difference to patient outcomes or healthcare improvement, and the wastages around things like over-treatment, excessive administration and fraud. So clearly we can do things better around systems improvement. If we add to that the fact that we are an ageing population, and this is a pretty scary graph from the OECD, which suggests that up until about now, we've been ageing, but we've been ageing at a manageable and a reasonable rate. If you look beyond 2010, 2015, then we start to see some really dramatic increases in ageing, in the ageing population. If you bear in mind that about 85% of our healthcare expenditure is spent on the last decade of life, and if that decade of life becomes the last 20 years of life, then before long the total GDP of a nation like the US, or any nation for that matter, will be spent on healthcare if we continue to fund healthcare the way that we do. Now clearly no economy is going to allow that to happen. They're going to insist on continuing education spending, defence spending and social services spending, and so clearly difficult choices are going to have to be made. And so we are really going to have to approach healthcare delivery in a different and more innovative way than we've been doing so in the future. We'll be making really difficult choices. And I don't think it's too frightening a prospect to suggest to you that we will, if we do not manage healthcare spending better, we will be making choices where you will be choosing between paying for the treatment of your ageing great-grandfather and your children. So it'll be a choice in the end. There simply will not be enough money to go around. What are the characteristics of the future then? We've talked about people living longer lives. There are greater possibilities for healthy ageing, and we'll come to that. And here I think HIT and technology generally has a part to play. That is one of the keys to carving out a different future in healthcare spending and the application of healthcare and treatment in healthcare. There is the danger, as I've just mentioned, of unhealthy ageing. We'll become more urbanised. That brings with it numerous problems, environmental, and it exacerbates healthcare issues as well. We're going to be interacting more with artificial intelligence, and here we see, again, prospects for the future. I can remember attending a workshop in as far back as 2000, where a surgeon in New York was controlling a robotic device in an operating room in Sydney, Australia, on a patient. So this, and we've been seeing in the press recently much more about artificial intelligence, and I think we're going to be relying much more on that than we are at the moment. The impact of climate change, we hear about rising oceans and rising sea levels, and we hear about destruction of marine life, but climate change has serious implications for healthcare as well. So if you add to an ageing population the problems of urbanisation and the impact of climate change, then you start to see a scenario that really has to be confronted. Again, though, we have hope in advances in science and technology, and again, I think GS1 is very, very important here, a critical player in the development of more efficient systems and more economical systems than we're currently using. And I've seen examples of that today which are very impressive. And again, I've mentioned the unaffordability of healthcare. So we strive for improved outcomes. That's our goal. Patient safety, improved outcomes. And one direction in which we must move to achieve this is to focus on the patient journey rather than episodes of care. And that's one of the things that we're concentrating on at ISQua. We just had a workshop at our meeting in Doha, which Tanya mentioned she attended, and it was very well attended, and it's really going to, it initiated an even stronger push on the part of ISQua to focus on innovation and systems change. And the patient journey is one way of managing the future of the delivery of healthcare. So how do we effectively improve outcomes? Training is critical. I've mentioned that the clinicians that you and I visit are well trained. We're talking here more about the training of clinicians. We're talking here about training more widely. If we're shifting the focus of healthcare to the patient journey and integrated care, we need to not only train clinicians, but we need to train the patient, and Fergal is sitting in the audience, and Fergal has done some really interesting work in this way. We need to train the patient and include the patient as a partner in their own care. We need to be training the patient's family, and the training must extend beyond the traditional healthcare setting into the community and into the home. There was another very elegant piece of work done along the lines of Fergal's work in Queensland, Australia, around diabetes, and the patient satisfaction and patient safety and the reduction in cost of that, of training people that were suffering diabetes in this region to understand and manage their own care better were really quite marked, and that's now been extended beyond that region. Improving care coordination, which we're referring to as the patient journey, and engaging the patient as a partner in care. And again, the increased use of IT is critical. So what we want to do, and you may have heard this before, I'm sure you have, but it's a clear message that at ISQua we are trying to deliver. We must move from tertiary prevention, which is keeping acute diseases under control, through secondary prevention, which is preventing the chronic diseases from becoming acute, to what we must focus on in the interests of patients and in the interests of costs, which is stopping disease before it occurs, and we must invest in primary prevention. So while hospitals have become and will remain the locus for the reality of innovation and efficiency, and the hospital is the place where all the critical parties come together, where the research is done, where the teaching is done, where the patients are treated, so it will always remain the locus. But we can't ignore the fact that hospitals are dangerous places. And hospitals are complex. They have complex systems. The work that you do is helping to sort through that, and I applaud that, and it must continue. But there are also high-risk systems. So when you put that number of professionals together around complex problems and diseases, you introduce risk. And that's really what we have to focus on if the hospital is going to continue to become the locus of innovation and efficiency, the reduction of risk. So we're focusing on the patient journey. This will require the introduction of widespread introduction of high technology care. The high survival rate after chronic illness that is increasing is going to require managing. Long-term follow-up care will move into the home. And again, that presents us with a whole range of new problems around how to manage that. And patients are more knowledgeable, but we have to recognise that patients sometimes think they are more knowledgeable than they are. So that we must manage expectations, and we must manage that as well. But the steps we must take to control that will be worth it. So the organisational challenges that come with this, the coordination of long-term patient journey follow-up. So as we move from episodes of care, which are dangerous in themselves because the periods of transition between episodes of care are where many adverse events and many accidents and many problems arise. So we must move from the episodes of care or silos of care to the patient journey and integrated healthcare. But that does present us with some challenges. Communications after transition from acute care. Who's going to be responsible? Who has a supervisory role? Typically it was clinician that each patient had their principal clinician. That will need to change if we're going to shift the focus from the clinical model to the social model. And we must recognise the patient's increasing expectation for involvement in their care. So if we are going to shift from the medical model to the social technological model, then we are moving from the patient journey to the person journey. If we're going to move to prevention as opposed to treatment, then we are starting to involve everybody in this journey. It becomes the person journey. So the journey can be characterised as the right care at the right time, by the right people in the right place, using the best resources. And as I've mentioned, what we've considered to be the medical model in the past now has 3 dimensions, and clearly GS1 is in one of those dimensions, and the community, the family and society is in the other dimension. So we now move from a model that's dominated by the clinician, by the medical model, to a model that now has 3 clear dimensions. And this is a summary of the paradigm shift that as we see it. The approach is going to move from one size fits all, as it currently is, to personalised medicine. from the patient information flow from the clinician to patient, the one-way flow which is often fragmented because of the silos of care, will become an integrated two-way information flow. It will become a dialogue between the clinician and the patient's family. The focus which has been provider-centric to date is going to have to become patient-centric, patient-centred care. Monitoring has been centralised in the hospital, and while the hospital will remain important, it now must become decentralised to the community and shift in that direction. The typical approach in the past, the invasive approach that has typified treatment, is going to become less invasive and more image-based. Procedure-based reimbursement is going to become episode-based and, more importantly, outcome-based, and it'll be a reimbursement will be based on a journey and the outcomes from that journey rather than individual procedures along the way. And as mentioned before, treating sickness will have to become preventing sickness or focusing on wellness. So we need to recognise the need for change, break down the treatment silos in favour of the patient journey. We need to engage the patient as a partner in care, engage HIT, including the work that you do so well, and think wellness rather than illness. And if we don't do that, and if the future looks the same as the past, then I think we're not representing the position correctly, and we're not confronting the problems that we can clearly see coming towards us.